want to extend something that I started last week, wherein I noted that if you were not pleased, that you could not grow. Part 2. Reading from the book of Genesis, taking as my text, what we need is to put together our own Bible, right, so I could quote myself, refer to myself. Or for those of you who enjoy that kind of humor that makes some of your voices quiver, put together a Bible based upon what I've said, and me turn to a chapter and read it, and then look at it and think, what in the hell does that mean? Did I say that? Just a joke, that couldn't happen. I want you to try and peer and remember some of this. I could drag this out with a long line of examples for putting together these same kind of little phrases, but I'm just going to use several. One has to do with whatever may be the total reality behind my use of the word creativity, a way in which I have noted it in various forms having to do with the A flow, the A force, then as I named it, the C force, the first persuasion, the C persuasion, the creative urge, whatever may be the total reality of this, all the way from what it may mean to life itself to what it may apparently mean to you individually, trying to be creative, not necessarily just in the arts, not necessarily just in trying to write a song or a book, but in feeling as though you are in some way more aligned to that which is encouraging life itself to grow. Which brings us to the first one of the second part that I was going to give you. That is, you cannot be sarcastic and be creative. I have chosen the word sarcastic, as I always choose words with a very specific intent, without me having to make up some new term. But you might note that what seems to be oftentimes the avant-garde, whether it be in rock music, whether it be in literature, whether it be in painting, but now you should be able to see that in a certain respect, an observable segment of that which might be recognized by the New York press, for instance, the Parisian artistic community, the critics, that might be noted as perhaps here comes a new wave in this field, that it is almost words written, it is almost paint thrown on canvas, it is almost notes coming from someone's mouth or their guitar, that if there would be one word to describe it, would be sarcastic. But now try this. And I'm not going to attempt to explain it because at the ordinary level of consciousness, you could apparently pick holes in it. But that, just at the ordinary level, that seems to survive as art. The paintings that people still claim to revere after 500 years, after 2,000 years, sculpture, literature, that, just by the ordinary definition, that survives and is taught in colleges and makes its way into a collection of the great literature, the great ideas, the great artistic endeavors of man, is almost without sarcastic inclusions. Now you've got to be, I could not go out in a simple way make this any sort of essay that apparently had a premise and that I could prove to an ordinary group of people. But you should be able to spot, just at the ordinary level, I'm not attributing any sort of mystical attributes to the work of a Da Vinci or Bach or a Beethoven or a Shakespeare. But if it has survived at the ordinary level, it was not sarcastic. It is not seen now. The feeling is that it is not sarcastic. And yet there are enough of you here and in other cities attracted to this nowadays that there are enough of you who feel as though you have some great artistic interest, or you feel as though it is the basis of a good hobby, that you would like to be writing or playing music or painting. And I have encouraged you all I can to do so, while telling you not to be hostile. And so some of you should be able to feel within yourself, maybe not as bad nowadays, it may not be as vocal in you, but at the times that you were in your teens, or that you were in college and you began to try and write poetry, that you took some art classes, some painting classes, you should be able to smell now that it was almost all sarcasm. Now the voices in you and in your peers told you otherwise, that you are correctly, as an artist must do, pointing out the foibles, the shortcomings of society. That your painting, taking all this paint and throw it over your shoulder in front of a fan, is representing what? Is representing the insouciant manner in which our government treats the people of Vietnam. Regardless of what seem to be the verbal explanations, you should be able to smell, you should be able to turn around, and it doesn't have to be just a contemporary painter or writer, just anywhere in your generation. It could have happened 15, 20 years ago. And you should be able to look at it, or to read it, or to hear it, and it's sarcasm. But you cannot be creative and be sarcastic. Now, all the few other examples I was going to give, including sarcasm, I could, of course, put under the heading of hostility. But I am trying to refine your eyesight of it, and I mean something specifically. It is one of the children of the father hostility, you might say. It is sarcasm. But it continually, in a contemporaneous sense, that is, the people involved, feel as though they're having creative urges, feel as though they are doing something creative. The poetry they wrote was creative. I was expressing something for myself. I was expressing something for my times. I was expressing something of my generation. And it's sarcasm. And you cannot be sarcastic and be creative. There is a place for sarcasm, or we would not have sarcasm. Remember, it takes all kinds, or there would not be all kinds. Life has a very limited and specific use for sarcasm. But it is not in the creative flow, and you cannot do both. And all of you are not necessarily feeling as though you're getting some very important message, but I repeat one more time, there are enough of you here that you should feel it even on a personal level, back down in your nervous system, of trying to write poetry, trying to write short stories, trying to paint. And it could have been worse, we'll hope it was worse, or more vocal in you than it is now. And it was sarcasm. And you cannot be sarcastic and be creative. I'll give you one or two more. I should have made this a task for you to go ahead and make up or find your own. Let me give you another one. You cannot be cynical and be an explorer. Because if you are, you'll never recognize new territory even when you step in it. Because the mind, the respiratory system, and then of course if you got two of them going, the muscles are outnumbered. If they are cynical, they will not recognize new territory. That if you had, I hate to ruin my own picturizations, but they're mine. If you jump right quick into an allegorical picture of a Magellan or a Columbus, and they had been cynical, and Columbus got to the islands that the Western world knew naught about, and he was cynical, we'd still be unnamed. We'd still be living in Germany and France and Poland, wherever all of our elders came from. He would never report it. He wouldn't have recognized it. All it took would have been what I mean by a particular kind of cynicism. But and I also note, if you can, jumping from the world of art, how about into the world of what appears to be philosophy? The world of ideas, the world of would-be religious people, all the way from organized religions to the latest cult. Can you get any sense of how rampant, once you can smell it, cynicism is? And they can be saying, I am here speaking in the name of love for the gods. I am here to preach brotherhood among us right-thinking people. And it's cynicism. There's a thread running through all of it. We are here to do the work of the gods. That is, us who recognize it. And whether they say it or it's left tacitly, is the other people, and they're working against us, or what are they doing here? Why don't they come to their senses? Or here I am a new prophet in the wilderness, the God sent me. Oh, I know a lot of people are going to think I'm foolish, that I'm ignorant, even I'm crazy, except for you right-thinking people who are now here with me. You cannot discover anything if you're cynical. Now let me take this one and see if I can turn it back on all of you more personally. You were cynical when I first met you. People who are interested in this, in a sense, are cynical in sort of an unmitigated manner. I could say the whole world is cynical in a sense, but you people were sort of doubly cynical. Notice how many people are vocally proving they hear some of that. By that time-honored tradition of our church here, instead of hollering amen, what do? You laugh. Which is, I guess we'll consider that to be our kind of preacher and audience congregation response for our church, as long as you're laughing. But you were all cynical, and you still got the voices in you. But you were cynical about everything you had been through. You were already cynical about your forefathers' religions. You were cynical about what you had read. You were cynical about groups that you had met. You were cynical, to some degree, about me and whatever I was up to. And you can't discover anything. Part of this has been a very subtle winning over process, not to me, but to get you away from cynicism. And cynicism also, when you start moving up in a particular place that I could chemically define, I could do it mathematically, between the yellow and the blue departments, is a kind of cynicism that has to do with nobody really knows anything, and if they did, they wouldn't tell me. Or I can put it several other ways. It's a kind of cynicism that there is no reality to anything, and yet I can't quit hoping. But I know I'll be disappointed. I'll either be disappointed or I'll get took. And you cannot learn anything while you're being cynical. Because part of what I mean by the word cynical, which is not that far removed from Noah Webster and his progeny, it's a foregone conclusion as to the outcome of what you think you're involved with, or what you think you're trying to investigate, the new area that you think you're seeking. This would be like Columbus, jump back to that. Oh, okay, I went to the trouble, I conned that old woman out of enough money for the ships, and I got all these guys out here, and I talked myself into believing the world's round, or there's another way to get around to India. I've looked at other maps and people who said that they've seen other land. Now I got all the people waving at the docks. I got maybe 1,000 men's life in my hands. There's nothing out there. They're right. We're going to sail just a few more miles, and it's going to be right off the edge of the earth. All right, that kind of cynicism, do you understand? To jump back to my kind of paradigmatic reality, using historical figures, he would have turned around and come back. Or had he kept sailing, I'm telling you, he would have never found land. Or if he saw it, he wouldn't know it. Cynicism will stop a person from learning anything. that you cannot learn anything new. It is like a continual mechanical, chemical reinforcement of the templates that you're already sensing everything through. It's the already wired patterns of the muscles and the mind and the respiratory system that what I now perceive to be the reality of reality, no matter how lacking, no matter how disappointing it is to me, that's it. No, what the hell, I don't have anything to do. I'll go over here and hear this guy talk. I'll go over here and I'll go to this other church, or I'll go, somebody really suggests this new book. All right, I'll read it. But I know. How about one more? This will get enough, or it should get enough of you people going. I'm not going to talk about it. I'll give you one more. When I'm saying one more, you understand these things that I'm doing as a sub-chapter to last week about you cannot be sarcastic and be creative. You cannot be cynical and be a discoverer. You cannot be fearful and change. And there's enough of you in here that I'm going to leave that with you, of that just absolute feeling, the inexplicable feeling of fear, and you can't change. Let me try and point, or crudely sketch, something having to do with purity. Many of you still write me notes and questions, and it arises to yourself that has to do with this, whether you use the term or not. But can you begin to perceive that the level of ordinary consciousness, there is no such thing as anything pure? And yet, consciousness, the language, speaks of things being pure. There is no such thing. My crude example is short-lived. But let me give you several things. There is no such thing as a pure type of person. And yet consciousness, without people noticing it, as reflected by words, as reflected by the wiring of the yellow circuit itself, that it speaks of people, historical people, figures, people that are contemporaneous with you, is being purely something. On a less personal level is the continual workings of human consciousness speaking of activity as being pure within themselves. That this is purely good behavior. This is a prime example of pure charity. And withal, here is a prime example of pure devilment. Evil incarnate. It has no redeeming quality whatsoever. Now, it is arranged in a way for a purpose. It's not the mistake of humanity. But there is no such thing at the level of ordinary consciousness as something that is pure. And from the viewpoint of someone attempting to pursue this, you should have some awareness by now as to the great, to say the least, befuddlement, confusion. And yet ordinary consciousness takes it as being that this confusion has to do with the fact that some people are purely misled in what they do. They do not see it as the perception, it is that which is already wired into consciousness, to wit that there can be something pure, that is what is the basis of what they call the problem. There is no such thing as any pure force, whether it be my label C, D, E. There is no such thing that is perceivable by ordinary consciousness as being pure. And it continually operates on the basis that that's not true. the perception mechanism, that is what seems to be an individual human's own consciousness, being as limited as everything else, is not pure. Hence, it could not perceive anything pure if it stepped in it. And some of you might take this small quantum leap from there to why, be they great thinkers, be they apparently touched mystics throughout the ages, all say that I've got some knowledge, I've got some experience of walking, talking, being with the gods, and they're beyond comprehension. Trust me. I'm telling you, they're amazing squared. It's astounding. And I've been there, I've talked to them, I had supper with them, they told me some secrets. But I'm telling you, they are beyond comprehension. When the perceiving mechanism is faulty, not pure, then everything it sees, even if it did exist in some pure form, it could not see it. I said there was nothing pure. I'll conclude this paragraph. Let me at least give you some notion that's tied in with consciousness. Conception, absolute pre-wired belief in some kind of extrinsic gods. Can you see a connection between that and the fact that, you know, beyond ordinary comprehension, beyond ordinary consciousness, there is a kind of nexologically pure, which I could call the primal flow again, or I could refer to it as being the total complexity of the whole body of life. But at the ordinary level, you can't see it. I can't make you see it. But the Pope can't see it. The world's most learned rabbi can't see it. People who say that they have personally been in a mystical experience and been in some kind of union with the gods still insist it's beyond comprehension. I can't tell you what he looked like. I can't tell you what she sounded like. I can't even tell you what he told me. But I was there. If anything exists in a pure form, and if you were confronted with it, operating on the level of ordinary consciousness, you could not see it. And on the contrary, that which consciousness refers to, without any analyzation, as being pure, whether they use the term or not. There is an evil person, there is a dastardly act, this is incorrect behavior. All of that is tacitly saying this is purely, or else, well, you should hear me, that consciousness is saying that. Do not trust that man. That woman is a lying bitch. End of comment. That is my perception. That's it. That's my relationship with this person. That's all I have to say. I don't need to know anything else. Don't tell me that she gave all of her last year's clothes to Goodwill. That doesn't change anything. The consciousness speaks as though things are pure, that they have some essence that can be identified, and it's purely this or that or something else. And it's not. Let me drag in religion again for a short paragraph. Throughout history, and right up until today's latest right-wing conservative man of the cloth, the religions have continually said, for instance, that Buddha wants to live his life through you. And of course, in this part of the world, they'd say, Jesus now wants to live his life through you, if you were attempting to be a Christian or were listening to their apparent sales pitch. I assume that you can perceive a reality behind that, that unknowingly they're telling the truth. It is life continually seeking the few through which it strives for greater purity and creativity. And yet they talk about dead people, whether they're given supermortal status after the fact or not, that there is some figure, there is some part of external gods that's still lingering about, just waiting, just hoping that you will come and join up with this church, that you'll become a good Muslim, and then Allah can live right here on earth through you. And they don't know it, but they're telling the truth. Other than the fact that we're not anything, take you back several weeks when I was pointing out something I wanted all of you to remember, and some of you to chew on for a while. That I noted for you, without any explanation, without any apologies, that you should note for yourself, without any explanations, any apologies, the almost irresistible feeling. Don't just think of it as being some mortal temptation. To be going past an obvious wreck and to see the flashing lights in the ambulance and see red, and you know either somebody is hurt badly or they hit a ketchup truck. And you get up to it, and I noted for you that I wanted you to become aware of it. It is almost, really, totally irresistible to get right up there where you know there's going to be a view. You can see a foot sticking out. You pull up. Regardless of race, creed, color, national origin, economic status. But what I wanted to point out to you after giving you a couple of weeks is this. It is a primo example, if you can see it right quickly, of the struggle between the wired tendencies, and I am strongly suggesting it shouldn't be hard for you to see that it is wired in primarily at one level in the factory. Because it is not something in some way that you have picked up psychologically. It is wired somewhere else for you to pull up there, and you know that it's there. The mind knows it, but something else is the one who's wanting to look. If you want a clear-cut, absolute, splendid example of what this is as opposed to life, and we're not talking about morality in any degree, it's for you to pull up next to that, and it is almost impossible not to look, just for any glance, that it is almost as though I will die. There's something uncontrollable is going to make me look. But I can say I won't look, I'll look everywhere else until I get right even with it. I am telling you, it is an absolute prime example of what this is, without any morality involved, in regards or vis-a-vis the natural tendencies of everyone wired up in this grid system on this planet. You can, of course, I assume that you understand I'm hinting, if you don't know it for yourself, you can refuse to do it. But in one sense, those of you that can feel this, and all of you should be able to feel it to some degree, take the worst habit you ever had, smoking, biting your fingernails. That is nothing. It might have seemed otherwise, that I've been biting my nails for 20 years. I can't just stop immediately. Compared to going past a wreck and seeing the foot and want to look, that's nothing. That's not true. It is almost impossible, and yet you can do it, but it is a living, instant example of this vis-a-vis the way you and everyone else is wired up. You don't have to go to church for it. You don't have to study philosophical tomes. All you got to do is find a car wreck on the interstate. Let me give you one more level of this. I'm changing it somewhat from the relationship of naturally wired level in regards to what you're trying to will yourself to do through this unnatural activity of trying to activate the circuits beyond what they need at the present time. But here is another aspect of this. That you are wired up in such a way that there is someone else in your past that you have no doubt, you can't describe it, it's already wired into you, that they have wronged you. I mean, something serious enough that it comes to your mind. They have wronged you. Don't worry about rationalizing it. The hardwired you, without any question, feels as though this person has wronged you sometime in the past. And then you meet another person who says, do you remember so-and-so, the person that has wronged you? And you say, yes. Have you heard what happened to them? Right. The message they're sending is they have very bad news gossip about this person. The person who has wronged you. Before they go any further, they've already said to you, you call it quite clearly, have you heard what happened to that person? Comma. I am still referring in a somewhat different manner to the struggle in a very real sense between doing this and what it does to your own chemical system, what you have got to have changed in you to resist this, and why it should be resisted. Let me point out on two levels how this struggle can be looked at. At the first level, that all of you should be able to do, at least all of you, I certainly count on knowing at the moment what should be done, and that is to resist the telling. That is, say, just whatever it takes. Say, no, I don't want to hear it. Or say, yeah, I've heard it and that's a shame, and then change the subject. But it's to absolutely resist. Do not let the person tell it to you. Now, I will believe that all of you would be aware of that on a good day. But how about the second level? If you want to get down in the trenches where the biochemical activity has become a reality, and that is that you resist in here the desire to even want to hear it. That biotic, that biochemical activity, that situation is already in you. Remember, I'm simply expanding, or I'm refining the tiger behind the door. The film that wants to be shown in your own consciousness that maybe you can do the first level. You say, no, I don't want to hear it. Really, I don't want to hear it. And inside, you go ahead and entertain. You go ahead and hear the voices that may come up with. What could it be? What I hope it is. But one level is you resist the telling. You say, I'm not going to hear it. Walk away. Do whatever it takes. Say, don't tell me I don't want to hear it. You tell them that. The real biochemical level is when internally, it's not between you now and the would-be tale teller. It's between you and this thing that seems to be consciousness, is you resist the desire to hear it. I am talking about a reality. I am talking about that which you can feel as an absolute chemical change in you. I'm talking about that, as I suggested to you last week, that if there were such things as real Jews or Muslims or Buddhists or Christians, it would be that which the religions have always talked about, that thou should not do so-and-so. They are describing what would be the natural behavior of someone who had undergone that kind of biochemical alteration. But this is the living proof of it. It's whether you can do it. It's not just refuse to hear it coming from out there, apparently, but refuse to hear the voices inside that go, ooh, you stopped them from telling, but God, I'd like to know about it. Is you can't fake it. That's why I can say with no cynicism that you should hear by now that there are really no such things as Christians or Jews or Muslims or Buddhists. They can't be. But the story at that level, of course, is, well, we are all fallible. We're all struggling to be that. I never said that I was a real Muslim. I'm trying to be. I am trying not to want to hear bad news about other people. I fail a lot. I got to admit it. Well, all they admitted without knowing it is they've admitted that they're human. They've admitted they're ordinary. They have admitted, I'm not a Muslim. I'm not a Christian. The biochemical alteration is such that you not only That's not even a trick anymore. Is you can stop the incoming impression. You can stop the incoming sound in this case that's going to have a certain desired, as far as you're concerned, the hardwired you. It's going to have a desired biochemical alteration. I mean, just, you've already told me enough when you said, you remember so-and-so? Have you heard what happened to them? It's already altering. Of course, ordinary people take it as being either some kind of spiritual shortcoming on their part, or they may think of it as being a psychological bruise they have that I want to hear. I know I should be more adult than to want to hear bad news about somebody against whom I have dreamed of revenge. It's sound has created a biochemical change in you, and in a sense, you're already salivating. And they say, have you heard what happened to so-and-so? You can forget all things about spiritual messages and psychological problems. There has been a biochemical change in you, in the brain. And it gets down, it affects the nervous system. Well, it affects, divided up a little more, the way in which I was talking, it will affect the respiratory system, the anticipation of hearing it, your eyes will get bigger. It will affect the muscles. But there's been a biochemical change, just the anticipation of hearing this bad news against your believed enemy. But that's nothing. To say, well, sometimes I can resist it. But an ordinary person cannot resist. Even somebody said, let me change the scenario a bit. They say, have you heard what happened to so-and-so? You go, no. And the change starts taking place, and suddenly, the place where you and the person standing, a gunfight breaks out, and they get shot, or they run for their life, and you never hear, or at least you don't then, that you were all prepared to hear it about the terrible news you could tell about your assumed enemy, and you don't get to hear it. Now, you can't call that making any progress. Because you could leave, and you could, if you were wired up as being a certain type, you could even go away and think, it's good that happened because I believe I could resist it, hearing it, but at least maybe the gods were looking after me, that I didn't have to be put into that position of temptation to prove whether I could resist or not. While ignoring the fact that they're walking away still entertaining, still victim of, and then as best they can describe it, or as best you could describe it with an ordinary person, still enjoying even the biochemical alteration that was made just in anticipation of hearing. Or being asked the question, have you heard what happened to so-and-so? But the only thing that is real change is it is still wired into you. And you can feel it. You can feel all the little molecules wanting to change around when they say, do you remember so-and-so? And as soon as the sound of that name hits you, it's like the tiger behind the door. But it is the little molecules already starting to move. They're going, do I? And they're ready to slobber. They're ready to rearrange themselves in a way to receive a physical kind of pleasure, a chemical pleasure over, tell me, what is it? And you can stop it. It's not a trick I can teach you. All of this has been trickery. But it's where you no longer, it is still, the possibility is there. You can feel it. And I do not want to hear it. I will not hear it. It would be the same thing as me suddenly drinking poison. It would be the same thing as me suddenly taking up drugs again right here on the spot. Is I simply will not do it for biotic reasons. I will not do it for my own chemical health. And it's got nothing to do with morality. It's got nothing to do any longer with any sort of struggle with calling down the names of some gods, help me to resist this. There is nobody to help you. It is the resisting of the desire to be altered in such a biochemical fashion. That is success. While remembering one of our minor mottos that I haven't reminded you of in a bit, that attempted success, efforts for one to become a different person, to pursue some kind of enlightened path, all effort is failure. only success is success. While I'm in the same neighborhood, let me throw you another quick one. The outgrowth of the belief in gods affecting humanity is more or less displayed nowadays by the belief in the subconscious. Since I've been talking about man and these infrasystems of the mind, the muscles, and the respiratory system, let me jump back. I've tried to take your head and your body under my arm and run at the door with you from several different directions. Not to attack psychology, of course, but because this is now part of your generation's wiring system. Everybody sitting here and listening to this, that it's no longer a theory. It is now part of horizontal reality that there are unconscious motivations in me, subconscious. And there, of course, is a reality to this. It's not just something that Freud or someone made up, but the kind of information available at the grid level is of no consequence. Without being cynical or sarcastic, it's of no consequence, or else I would tell everybody, hey, go into analysis. And of course, all of you should already know that. That's not their job. But what I was going to point out, having to do with these three infrasystems. Quick sketch, quick hint. Can any of you begin to see a kind of disharmony insofar as what seems to be the immediate aims, or could be the immediate aims, between those three or any two of those infrasystems? To wit, a person says, I periodically end up, I was going to say at the pool hall. I guess I should make it a video arcade nowadays, still I appear to be up to date. Let's use pool hall. Even you youngsters, you still know what that is. That a guy says, you know, I can shoot pool. I grew up in a pool hall, but there's this one guy I've known for years, and anytime he shows up, I can physically beat him. I know it. And yet there's something about I've known him, I was in business with him once, or some kind of relationship, some kind of dance has been established between me and him, and that son of a gun will beat me every time we play pool, and he can walk out of this pool hall, and you can bring on another 20 people that he can beat, or that could beat him, and I can beat them all. In other words, I know, there's no doubt I can beat him, and yet some way, when it comes to me and him starting to play this game, I got some kind of subconscious desire to lose. My little quick hint, I guess someday we'll come back to this, but this is the kind of thing that some of you should be able to run with on your own. Can you see a kind of different mapping of this idea of subconscious desire? And you women can surely find your own example if you, but the kind of thing if somebody says, I know I can do so-and-so, or I know I can appeal to a certain kind of man, and yeah, I get around that man, and I will just seem to suddenly engage in an endless stream of solecisms. I'll become offensive. I don't know what I do. I'll get sick. I'll get headaches. I'll throw up on him. It seemed like I just have a desire to fuck up this situation. You know, if I had time to go into analysis, I'm sure there's some explanation. How about this? I'm just giving you one possibility. I'm asking you another great musical question. What if the muscles, the ones that say that I can beat this guy playing pool, for instance, maybe that's a possibility, that the muscles may apparently have an immediate aim and the mind may have another one. And it comes out. It's been inexplicable. In years past, it would have been the gods, and nowadays it's a subconscious desire. Of course, you can find other examples of the hint I threw in at the end of referring to the distaff portion, that there could be a difference between the muscles and the respiratory system. That they are already wired up in a certain area, and within the confines of what I'm describing or how you would perceive it as a situation of a pool game, a would-be relationship with a member of the opposite sex, that it seems as though I say I can do so-and-so, I can beat this guy playing pool, or I can get along with this type of man, and then apparently some kind of subconscious, deep-rooted, subconscious drives come out, and I screw it all up. what if you could see it? What if you could find out that biochemically it is two of the infrasystems apparently being wired up to have, in that immediate context, different goals? Those of you that care to take my hint seriously, there's more to it than just looking at something. You can use it. I forget that. Some of you still want to suffer. Plus some of you still want to believe that I am, that is you, that I am a long way from ever getting home with this thing. That it seems to make more and more sense sometimes, and I keep picking up little pieces, but my God, I'm a long way from being over all of this. All these deep-rooted fears, all this hostility I have. And regardless of what he says on Thursday, all of these subconscious things, I mean, that's what they are, that just keep popping out. And if I live long enough, it's like I'm living in a shabby house that has all these knot holes in the floor, and every time I turn my back, it's like another rat's head comes up. And I try to cover that hole, and by the time I sit down and smoke a cigarette, I hear a noise, and there's 3 or 4 more back here. There's a kind of biochemical change that's like instant, house-wide extermination. It's like, if you would like to see me as being the great mystical Orkin man. It's just the whole house is fumigated, and that's the end of it. The rats just don't show up. Try this. Back to a good yellow circuit, superficial yellow circuit level. Can any of you see what now? I'm asking this for a reason it'll become a little more clear, perhaps. Can any of you see what now? If I had used or had given you solid, constant words, that is maps, but descriptions. If I'd come up with a solid, once and for all description like of the forces, and I'd call them something. Well, one of the possibilities I've thrown in along the way, like creative and destructive, and then whatever the other one was. But if I'd stuck with that, and I hammered on it, or how about this? What if I had come up with a term, how about this, self-neuralization, that right from the onset, and I described it, self-neuralization is the ability to be conscious, to be aware of your own consciousness without being aware of what consciousness says it is. You got that? That would be self-neuralization. And I had said that this is the cornerstone of ever doing this, whether you had lived now or whether you were living like 5,000 years ago. That is it. Now, people have been close to it before. It's been building up to this, but I am telling you it is self-neuralization. It's to be aware of consciousness without being aware of what consciousness says it is. All right. Let's just say that I'd done that one. If I had given out and stuck with a kind of solid, constant names, but of a name, terms. Can any of you see well now that yellow circuit in everyone would have very quickly, as soon as it heard the description once or twice, it would just quickly, to say the least, would have taken any future mention of that as a reference to something with which it is familiar. Even though it doesn't understand it. And this has happened to you all your life. I don't mean just some term I could make up. But it would then be familiar with it, and this is what it amounts to, is that ignorance is then taken on the color of knowledge via words. The world is full of people, including your old selves, that are sitting there right now, somewhere in this country, throughout the world. They're reading a book, or they're listening to a lecture, or they're having a discussion amongst themselves over coffee. But let's say reading a book. Be these as example, if you hear me right quickly, and all of you went through it, and you read some book that had a term from some that even though you didn't understand the term, that in some way you admitted to yourself. I'll take mine, the one I just made up, of self-neuralization. I've seen the words written, I've heard him say it, and then he wrote it here in this book, and I keep reading the term, and I can't really do that. I think it almost makes sense that if I could in some way, if a person, through some great effort or some trick, could continually be aware of their own consciousness without being aware of what consciousness is saying that it is. Ooh. And you would feel as though, all right, I nearly understand that. I can't do it. So if you can't do it, you don't understand it. Now the few, but now you should understand that. For people to say, well, I understand that we should love one another. Now, I can't do it. Well, you don't understand it. Not in the sense that I mean it, in the sense that many of you now understand understanding. If you understand something, that is synonymous with being able to do it. And so the yellow circuit could take this term that it read, that let's say that I had used on many occasions, and said, this is the cornerstone of everything I do. And I wrote several books, and they all seem to be a continuing exposition, a hammering home, or at least continually referring back to, that all of this in some way is predicated upon your ability someday, if you're lucky, to be able to self-neuralize. And every time you read it, and you're taking, let us say, this you're reading very seriously, and you hit it, and something biochemical, the light waves coming up and hitting the rods and the cones, and it's making that little small biochemical alteration in the brain, self-neuralize, yeah. And you're now familiar with it. And the circuit operates on the basis of familiarity, that if you stopped and questioned, all right, can you do that? No, but I know what it means. That's ignorance. If you can't do it, you don't understand it, whatever it is. A man cannot say, well, I'm a mathematician. I am. Well, can you stop and do a quadratic equation? Well, I can't do any of that kind of shit. I can't do it, but I'm a mathematician. Trust me. You know, out in the horizontal world, even that wouldn't fly. Well, I'm a doctor. Well, I got a headache. Well, I don't fool with stuff like that. Well, I need an operation. I don't do any of that. I don't touch people. I don't fool with them, but I'm a doctor. I don't understand anything about the body. I don't even like to look at it. It's ill. But the yellow circuit operates that every time it sees self-neuralized, yeah, but it's talking about ignorance. I can't do it. But yeah, I understand it, and it's not true. It is ignorance now being colored. It's flying under the colors now of knowledge. That, yeah, I know what it is, and it doesn't. Do any of you get any glimpses as to why this operates the way it operates? And yet it would seem to be in direct conflict with it ever going anywhere. That the cynical, even just the normally cynical, to hear of someone like me, it's all right, you may know something, I want to know what it is. I'm prepared to pay, prepared to put up with whatever the price is, but give it to me. I'm a big boy, girl, don't beat around the bush, just give it to me. And where's the little Bible? Where's the good outline? What really explains what you're up to? Nothing. I mean, here's something we have put together, here's something based on what I said, they put together 6 months ago, and it's almost useless, I wouldn't let you people have it. That it's now for sale out in the lobby, you can have it, but it's got almost no validity. It sounds as though, to a good cynic, to a good sarcastic lady or gentleman, that, ooh boy. And it's not ooh boy. The yellow circuit, and it's part of the tenor of everyone's wiring system, that I'd like some nice solid answers. Would you please be consistent? I mean, if there's such a thing as being able to self-neuralize, if there are really three forces going on and people don't see what's going on, describe them for me. I got some time here, I'll devote myself, I want to hear it. But don't keep turning around every 4 or 5 months. You think I don't realize it. And it's almost as though you've changed the rules of the game. It doesn't sound like what you were saying before. Am I beginning to find out that you don't know what you're talking about? Are you beginning to contradict yourself? you see that in a certain respect I have pulled and stretched every map, everything I've ever said to you, people on a personal level here and a few in the other cities, that I have pulled and stretched everything almost to the point that none of it has any form left. It almost does not exist, whether you are fully cognizant of that fact or whether you're fully ready to have me pointed out to you. They just hardly exist anymore. And there is a reason, and part of it has to do with this going out on another level, what I keep referring to as going more public. Can you see now, after the fact, or once I pointed out, that in a sense I have pulled and stretched, and for a while it seemed to get more and more complex. It was almost more than anybody could do to try to keep up with the terminology. It's like every week, whether you thought about it this way or not all the time, that I had come out with something new that you should have written down, or you got to even possibly remember a whole new term that sounds like this, that has great meaning. It may even strike you personally, ooh, just that term. Ah, boy, this is getting somewhere, and I never even mentioned it again. And yet you got in a notebook somewhere, you've devoted 3 or 4 pages or a half a notebook, you label it there, and you're ready for the next information that goes under this heading. And you never hear of it again. Or maybe 3 or 4 months later you hear something else that strikes, and you write it down, and then you look at both of them together, and you think, wait a minute, both of them can't be true even. Not only did you not hear more about the first one, but now there's something else that sounded important, and it suddenly strikes you, being no fool, getting off by yourself and let the yellow circuit talk, and he goes, hey, wait. We thought both of these were important, but looked at together, something's wrong because one of them can't be true. It has almost reached the point that none of this has much form left. But what's going to happen is I have now got to, all of us that survive, it's got to be reformed into a more simplistic guide for the many. And it has got to be simplistic. It can't be this, because I've almost destroyed this anyway. But even where I try to reform it, which I wouldn't, the many cannot live with this. It is no food whatsoever. It's just insanity. Or it's tempting. It's like I'm being tempted, and then somebody's making a joke at my expense. At least the sarcastic and the cynical. I could have one good night out and go, boy, I thought I had seen some farces under the name of self-help or religion or spirituality or New Age thought, but hey, I've seen the topper of them all. Let me give you another little quick one. I mean this in a way that you haven't heard about or read about. I'm not referring to anything that is now a scientific or would be scientific fact of some kind. But there are clocks and timetables within the body of life. And one of the clocks is the normal lifespan of a human. And within a human lifespan is an infra clock. And one of them is tied directly to this. And if you wait too long, the train will leave, and you can't ever catch up. And within that is almost a definition of, quote, this thing, which until I bit my cheek, I started to give you a definition of this thing, since I never have. So to prove my consistency, I still won't. But there, somewhere in all of what I just said, is almost a definition of what this is. And the time is fast coming, and I'll include you people that are getting this right now from afar, whether it be in distance or time. The time is coming up very shortly that all of you are going to have to just go ahead and turn loose. And you're going to have to let the momentum of this train push you forward. It's not magic. in the ordinary sense. It is not some kind of spiritual something. It is not my self-produced, ordinary mystical ability. But I am fully aware that there are many people sitting in this room, and those that may be picking this up on tape from afar, that you still feel in some way that you are lacking, that you are still sort of an outsider. There are surely people in here that you just smell, or you think from maybe your imagined view of how I treat them, that there must be people in here that are just, they met me before you did, they got involved with this, you will never catch up. Plus, I don't take into account the terrible problems you have, and you no longer feel free to even mention them to me, which is good, just the way it should be. But the time is about to come upon you that you're just going to have to turn loose. And you're going to have to see that there's nothing to be cynical about. There is no basis for sarcasm, that you can't be creative, you can't even get close to being creative, you can't be peaceful, you cannot be pleased, you can't discover anything. And it's reaching a point. It truly is. And part of it is me tearing apart the form of this right before your very eyes. That you're going to find that there's going to be a gap between what seems to be us in these weekly personal meetings and then me doing something public. And I won't measure it in time or in space, but it's going to feel like a gap that you've suddenly been stripped naked and you're not sure where you belong. And all you can do is turn loose. You've got to have that kind of already established commitment. I'm not about to try and talk anybody into it, but it's going to come, those of you that, and it's not improper that you feel there's much that I have yet to experience. That is a wonderful understatement of it, but it's not any reason for you in some way to personally feel as though, well, it's reached a loggerhead. Of course, if you feel that way, you should drop out, just disappear. Or if you got voices that still say, wait a minute, you're finally going to try and trick me into giving up my will and my good judgment. But it's going to reach a point that there's a kind of shortcut. It's not exactly the only way, but it's going to come to a time that you're going to have to. It's going to be the only way left. It's kind of a shortcut and one revolving of that merry-go-round that you're going to have to turn loose. And there's going to be enough momentum going that you can be carried further in a creative direction than some of your voices would tell you that you deserve. And I'm not going into that, because if you get it, you deserved it as far as I'm concerned. But in a sense, some of you that feel, or some of you who came in later, and you feel as though there's some kind of physical gap, that you hadn't been here long enough, or you're not smart enough, but just maybe you hadn't been here long enough, that you'll never catch up. In a sense, you got an advantage, because it reaches a point and you can find out what I'm talking about turning loose. It's almost as though you can jump on the backs of these other people, and a lot of the effort they did, it's like you can steal it. You don't know what you're doing, it just happens. It's like you walk all over their shoulders and their backs. And I don't mean in some kind of negative sense. It's like an unfair advantage. There's even an aspect of particle physics that could drag in some things they can't explain about how apparently certain atoms can steal energy, that they can go against the so-called laws of the conservation of energy. They have to warp what seems to be the observable frame of ordinary time, which if John Marcus insisted, I might tell you something else. But I think I'll let him worry about it. But it's as though you can get something you didn't deserve. And if it works at the particle level, you know damn well it works at this level. Don't you?